So again, thanks for that, Mike. As you know, my name is Eban Tomlinson, and I'm a product designer, roughly where the boots meet the road, so to speak. So don't skewer me too much on anything else that we've got going on, but please feel free to come talk to me afterwards. So I'm going to talk to you about P&ID Design Validation and PCF Generation. We're going to start with this thing's wrong application. Sorry, guys. We're going to talk about piping and instrumentation diagram, design validation, or P&ID design validation. First question you're probably going to have is, what is it? Now, most of you have probably interacted with P&ID design diagrams or P&ID diagrams, but I've got to cover it anyways. So, functionally, it's a diagram which shows the interconnection of your systems and how they should go together and what is going to affect that system. Simply a design diagram, really simple. Nice little line diagram. Don't scare me too much on this one. This is just a Google image, I'm not going to lie to you. But functionally, we want to go from that into something like this, and we want to make sure that it is correct, right? This is the plan we want to have. I want to know that there's 4 pumps in that any given circuit in that engine room. Well, good luck doing it from that model, right? So what does it solve? I think you're probably already getting the gist of this. This is pretty simple. We're going to let you... I can't even read that from here. Can you guys read that stuff? Of course not. So sorry. I'll do a bit of reading from slides, even though this isn't really what we're supposed to be doing. How do I know whether my systems are complete before I build or even release to production or for that matter, deliver it to the customer? How do I know that they're going to work? What is the how do I communicate the design intent? How do I go from my senior system designer who's never seen ShipConstructor down into my pipe modeler who actually has to, well, literally put the boots to the road, much like myself? How do I get the information availability around my organization? What do I do with that? Well, P&ID lets you move that stuff out into the organization. You can see the simplified version of the system instead of this big long list of spools or an arrangement drawing that may not necessarily be understandable in the context of a system. And it enables an artifact-based workflow, and I'll cover this one a bit more in detail, but functionally it allows you to cover your butt. So how does it help me? I'm going to probably belabor a lot of these points, but this is what we're trying to drive home here. It allows you to ensure that you've got consistency with your design intent. So you've got a P&ID diagram, you've got a ShipConstructor model. Coming out the backside of this thing is a report that says, yes, in fact, these things are the same, or at least consistent. You've got actionable lists and reports based in XML, much like a lot of our other ShipConstructor exports. We give it to you in XML so you can go out and do something else with it. And one of the things that we introduced was speed of checking. So in other words, a scope limitation feature. So you can limit scope by spool breaks, by drawing. Don't quote me on the drawing one, actually, now I'm thinking about that. By system or by branch. And what that enables you to do is instead of running a P&ID design validation across your entire model, you can just run it across this one piece and do spot checks. And it allows you a much quicker process to ensure that you're actually getting these things put into your model. You're designing from your P&ID diagram as you're modeling. So again, we're going to belabor these points. It removes human error. This is a really important one, obviously. But this is the bigger one. It improves confidence in your system, in your verification of your system completion. I know for a fact that I am done designing that one. I can now move on to my next system. It reduces your cycle times, and this is a big one because part of what we want you doing, or part of our design intent with this feature, is that you're constantly rerunning these verifications. I run a verification, it's inconsistent. Why is it inconsistent? That's not okay. Okay, I go and I change that bit of the model, I rerun the design verification, or design validation rather, and boom, I know that it's consistent and I have a report that tells me so. It reduces costly errors. I don't think I need to tell anyone in this room exactly how big of a deal it is to have to go back and do any kind of rework. I have to stick a pump in an already crowded engine room. This is not going to work. So how does it do it? This is the interesting part. Through tags and mapping rules. Now, for those of you who are familiar with P&ID diagrams, you'll know that inside them they have P&ID tags on every single asset within it. What we do is we allow you to map based on identifying properties that tag to a stock name, a stock description, or a UDA within ShipConstructor, depending on how you want to set up your mapping. So an identifying property means that if this matches this, then you're okay. But if those don't match, no dice, this is broken. You can't go any further. Or we have comparison properties. You could put in something like wattage, like weight, whatever the case may be. But what those do is it'll notify you that these are inconsistent. What does that mean? Well, not really that much. Maybe it's okay. Maybe it means that it is, in fact, a little lighter than it's supposed to be, or a little more powerful than it's supposed to be. That may be okay, but that is something that needs to come to your attention. The other part that we allow, wow, that does not show up at all, does it? There's 3 groups of rules and settings in there. Well, I'm kind of ugly. Just I don't want anybody falling asleep after lunch. This was the thing, right? They throw me to the wolves right after lunch. Everybody's sleeping through my presentation. I love it. Not quite. Is this good? Awesome. So 3 different sets of rules and settings and some really nice primary colors. Awesome. What does that mean, though? We allow you to set up XML files. Well, I mean, you're not setting up the XML files. That's just the back-end side. But we allow you to set up different sets of rules and settings that define how this design validation is going to be run. You load up the rules and settings. You run it. You get your output. Fantastic. But maybe the rules that I use for maybe the rules that I use for one system are not the same as the other system, and I want to keep them separate in case I change one. I don't have to hunt through this big, long list. Okay? We allow you to load up multiple settings. You can store them wherever you want, but you only have one set of rules and settings active at any given time. And again, that's your mapping, and that is something that you have to set up. The reason being is that we couldn't ascertain, from our perspective, sitting up in Victoria with no ship in front of me, how you guys are actually going to be doing this stuff. So again, 5 XML artifacts. Okay, you're going to have, and I really want to make this clear. This is not, when I say artifacts, I'm not talking like this kind of an artifact. This is not what you're after. You might look like him when you're doing it, but this is not what you're after. We have 5 XML artifacts. We have a P&ID export XML artifact that comes out of the AutoCAD P&ID diagram. So you'll fire up your AutoCAD P&ID. You have to have ShipConstructor installed because you need both in order to actually run that XML export. So you create your P&ID export. You have your mapping rules set up. You do it before or after you've done your modeling, whatever you choose, but it requires some forethought. You make that XML file. Then you run your ShipConstructor export, and what I need to make clear here is that the map, after you've done your P&ID export, you're then done with AutoCAD P&ID. The mapping rules, the ShipConstructor export, the settings and the comparison results can be run solely within ShipConstructor without having AutoCAD there, so you can split these processes apart. So you got your mapping rules, then you do your ShipConstructor export, and you can do that ShipConstructor export from anything that has pipe in it. Any kind of a pipe model drawing, whatever. I did not actually check. Do you know, Dennis, if it supports part views? No. There's your answer. Never mind. Your settings and your comparison results. So once you load up the first 4, you run it, you get your comparison results, you review them. Are they okay? Yes. Fantastic. Move on. Archive your comparison results. It's functionally a report for you. So what's the process? You kind of probably already got it from what I've just said, but let's talk about it. Start with your P&ID diagram. That's all designed. You've got all of your information in there, your knowledge, if you will. You generate your P&ID XML. Now, this can be done by a lower-level user who's just been handed the P&ID DWG, or it can be your actual senior designer, whatever you like. You import your mapping rules, and then you create your model export. Simple as that, and then you get your results. Now, don't take me too much to task on this screenshot either. This is just a testing screenshot, so the model up top clearly has no basis in reality. What I did want to show you was the screenshot down below, which is the interface within the model diagram. We do have an interface as well in the AutoCAD P&ID if you choose to run your consistency checking from there, which you can do, to be clear. Now, I have a higher resolution version of this stuff, so if you guys are really interested in getting into some details about how this thing works, come and find me after my presentation. I'll be happy to talk with you, and for that matter, even take your input if you want to crucify me on something. Now, you notice I've got the arrows in there again. I want to make sure that you guys realize this is something that you're going to be rerunning. You need to make sure that you're rerunning this thing across all of your systems, across your entire project, really, and you need to do it frequently and often in order to make sure that you're actually getting the maximum benefit from it. You don't want to run it once on your entire ship. You certainly could, but it's probably going to take all night. So you can create multiple sets of mapping rules. These are just technical details. You can create multiple sets of mapping rules, but only one set gets to be used at a time. XML is the interchange format, much like we've set the precedent for years and years and years ago. An AutoCAD P&ID and ShipConstructor need to be installed on at least one system at your shop, so that, because we in ShipConstructor utilize portions of AutoCAD P&ID in order to generate those exports. Now, I'll take questions at the end of it here, and I can hop back to any point in this presentation, but we're going to move on now to piping component file generation, or PCF generation. So what is it? Well, I'll use an example. This is a very simple pipe run, pretty clearly. This is actually a PCF file. It's a text-based file that is generated from your pipe model that contains the intelligent information that tells you about what system am I, how do I look like, what's going on within it, what are my end positions, where are my supports, where are my equipment connections, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And to be clear, this is only like 1/3 of the file that was generated from that screenshot that I just showed you. These files are extensive and they contain a lot of information. Again, we're really, really pushing this, but the intelligent information, you can see it, connected runs, or in PCF parlance, lines, valves, connections, the accessories on those things, down even so far as to nuts and bolts. It will tell you how many of those, what orientation, and where they're going. The equipment and the supports, and where those supports go and how they relate to equipment, et cetera, or to structure. But what do I do with it? Well, PCF import is supported by a lot of vendors. You can do isometric creation. AutoCAD has a wonderful tool. I believe it's still in web, is that correct? Yeah, AutoCAD WS has a automatic isometric creation based on PCF imports. So, you know, I've got my P&ID design validation. I know that my pipe model is correct. I want to generate some isometrics for arrangement, installation, whatever the case may be. I can pump it into AutoCAD WS if I have a license for that, or another tool called Isogen. These things are becoming, like the PCF file is an industry standard for communicating that information into it. I can run pipe stress analysis with programs such as Caesar 2, FEA, whatever you decide to call it. Pipe bending is supported by a few manufacturers as well that I've noticed out of Europe. Obviously, you have to check with your manufacturer to see if they support that kind of thing, but this is something that you can do with a PCF file. So what does it solve? Like, what are the actual things I'm trying to do that this PCF generation is going to let me work with? I can get design information, intelligent information out of my marine information model into anything else. As long as it supports this file format, I can use it elsewhere. If you have another tool that you like to use and it supports PCF, go nuts. This is what we like to do. I'd like to think we're best of breed. You can make that decision. The stress tests. You want to know those before you do your construction. Will this system last when I throw this thing out, when I deliver this ship to my customer? Is this thing going to work? And as-built system information to consumers outside of the MIM. This is your ability to export that intelligent information. Maybe I'm working in a completely different program and I need to know what you've got in that ship for a retrofit. This is something you can do to get that information out to them. So how does it help you? Well, it's probably coming up pretty quickly here. I mean, again, I'm belaboring points, but I had to fill a whole half hour. Maybe you want to generate your isometrics automatically in the case of like across an entire project. This is something you can actually do. Maybe you want to perform a stress test, a spot stress test, or across an entire project system, arrangement drawing, whatever it is. You can definitely do that. I want to collaborate with non-ShipConstructor users. As much as we don't like it, we're going to allow it. Maybe. I want to integrate with pipe benders. These are things that this PCF file can do. It's really, the sky's the limit when it comes to this file. You guys can take it, go elsewhere, and if you find something that supports it, it's a standard. You can just pull it in and go. This is an example, albeit that one's a little sharper. A low resolution version of it. Unfortunately, Prezi doesn't allow me to pull in, or rather, more accurately, I didn't figure out how to get this into a sharper format. This is an isometric created from the screenshot I showed you at the beginning of the PCF section. Fully automatically generated, annotations, bombs, the works. This was done with I think it was done with AutoCAD Web Services, if I'm not mistaken. I do have a higher resolution version of it on my laptop. Come and see me if you want to examine it. I'm happy to show it to you and walk through it and see what you guys would do with it. But this is an example of what you could use a PCF file to generate, and again, fully automatically. So how do I do it? Well, like anything else, there's going to be a bit of pain at the beginning. We put a significant amount of time into setting up your catalogs in such a fashion to do as much as we possibly can. So your pipes, your elbows, your reducers, your caps, all of these things are going to be set up automatically with the correct information, which I'll tell you what those are in a second. The ones that are going to be manual are valves, flanges, and branch types. Now, the valves are going to be pretty easy to understand why we can't set those up for you automatically. Unfortunately, you might have some in our pipe catalog, you might have some in our equipment catalog. We need to allow you to put both of those into these things because obviously that's important information. It's simple to set up, but it's still going to require some intelligence. You know, someone's going to be sitting hacking at a keyboard for a little while. Flanges and branch types. Again, there's so many options with these things, and the list that we can put these things into is ridiculous. This is 1/3 of one page of a 96-page document that has all of the available types within the PCF file. So us being able to map that into our catalog, there were a lot of things that we just couldn't decide, but that would be based on how you guys are setting up your catalogs. It should be pretty quick for you guys to go in and map those things, and once you set it up, you're done. It's all stored in the database and kept there for you automatically, and we've made our best guesses in the cases of the manual setup ones to try and get you started, but fundamentally you still have to set up a component type and an S key. Now, component type is functionally, okay, I'm something in the file, but what am I? And that answers that question. The S key, and you'll notice I'm pointing to 2 different columns here. Actually, it should have been 3, I apologize. The S key itself, which is usually a 4-letter or 4-character thing, it breaks it down into something that the PCF file can understand and those things that consume these files. Then you'll notice it's got a shape. Well, that tells any isometric creation program what shape to plot. It kind of makes it real easy to scan through. Yes, I know that that is the symbol that I want to plot in my isometric. Map that onto the correct stock, and away you go. You've also got a plotted isometric shape in the case of this particular diagram. When can you have it? Both of these products will be available in ShipConstructor 2014, which is coming out second quarter of 2013. That's complex to say, but regardless. Any questions? One piper in the room, 2? And no questions? All right, then. Guess I didn't need to allow 10 minutes for that. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it is. Thank you very much, guys.